Hello, Dr. Baker. This is Kyle Bishop from your ESLO 610 class from the first spring bi term. Here to discuss my presentation that I created for multilingual learners, the professional development session. My presentation is inspired or based upon chapter 8 of our text, which is differentiating instruction for multilingual learners. I use the term ML because it's something that our school uses here at Seneca High School in Louisville. We use ML, multilingual learners, to classify our ESL and EL students. Now, just before I get into the presentation, the premise behind this is I would have ahead of time let the staff know that in order to best participate in this professional development, that they would need to bring a lesson or a text or whatever they're using that week for their multilingual students. And general population students, just whatever lesson they're teaching, to bring a sample of that to the presentation so they can work with their PLC members, sit with their PLC, and use some of the strategies that will be discussed in this presentation. Start out with a quote from Ariza, just to kind of define what differentiation is. And that's whenever a teacher varies teaching to create the best learning experience possible, or reaches out to address a student in the best way the student learns, that is differentiating instruction. So I have 4 strategies that I'm going to go through here for differentiating instruction for multilingual learners. One of them is translation. Second one is modification. Then we get into amplification, and then a strategy called accountable talk. So translation is really important. We know it's important to use translation tools whenever we can to help multilingual learners access our content. And one of the main tools that we use here, and this is pretty common, is just to use Google Translate. And that helps provide students with different tools to translate assignments. Also, I would throw out there in the presentation that whenever teachers create assignments using Google Docs, that students can use the translation tool that is built into Google Documents and even Google Slides to help translate the content, so they can not only see it in English but also their L1. And then just have a quote there again from Ariza to understand the importance of translation, and that helping students to help themselves will promote satisfaction because they will find pride and solace in themselves as viable, valuable, contributing human beings who have much to offer in spite of previous dilemmas and plights. And once I walk through Google Translate and Google Docs and Slides and how to use those translation tools that are built in, that's when I get to the interactive portion of this presentation, where they can work with their PLC, they can take whatever lesson they have, and they can use those translation tools and apply it to their own lessons. So, my hope is always that whenever there's a professional development session, that teachers can learn things that they can immediately use in their own classroom. So I was going to provide them with 10 minutes within their PLC to discuss how they could use these translation tools, or maybe even start to tailor and translate some of the assignments they're using that week for their ML students. The next strategy I wanted to discuss was modification. There's a great outlet that we use here. It's become very popular recently. It's called Diffit. It's a great online tool. It's completely free. And you can modify the text in many ways by changing the structure, its lexile level. You can even add in questions. You can have it outline important vocabulary in the text. And it's a great way to make the content more accessible. And, according to Freeman and Freeman, teachers provide students with a great deal of language input and use various techniques to make the new language comprehensible. And Diffit is a great tool, a great technique to help modify a text. And I have the link in there to Diffit, where teachers could, again, work in their PLC. We call them PLTs, professional learning teams, but I know it's more commonly known as a PLC, professional learning community. But work with their PLC. Try to use Diffit to modify text for multilingual learners. It could be something as simple as the instructions for the class period, or even you could front load vocabulary. This is especially helpful for ELA teachers who want to modify larger texts for their students. The third strategy I wanted to discuss was amplification. And to amplify text, you can really help multilingual learners access it better by adding images, outlines of vocabulary, and different audio, just multiple forms of media to help kind of bring that text to life, to amplify it from its original version. Another aspect of amplification is to chunk the material, present the material with subheadings and shorter sentences. It's just, again, it's kind of like modification, but instead of like watering down the material, it just provides different multimedia supports along the way, so students have different ways of learning the content. And then again, I would have teachers take turns in their PLC discussing how to amplify text for multilingual learners. And then I had an example where, and this is from our ML specialist here at Seneca, where she told us how to create these things called explore boards, where you would have a concept in the middle of the explore board, and then all around surrounding that topic or question or whatever it is that you're teaching, you have different ways to access and learn the material. And I had a quote from the website that's run by our ML specialist, Dr. Shorey, that using an explore board with ML supports oracy, reading, viewing, and representing different texts. So explore boards are great ways to amplify text for students. The final strategy, and this is something, again, we would practice together in the professional development session, it's accountable talk. And this can be achieved by providing students with strategies to discuss what they're learning with classmates. We always hear that those doing the talking are the ones doing the learning. So sometimes it's important to set aside some time for students to converse with one another, maybe in small spaces, small groups, maybe with an elbow partner before we have whole class discussions. It kind of helps build that confidence. And the strategy I have introduced here is the QSSA strategy, which is question, stem, signal, share, and assess. And I wanted to use what we learned from our professional development session to kind of drive this QSSA strategy with the staff. So they would be posed with a question: which differentiation tool from this presentation would you like to try with students? And then they would be provided with a sentence stem. The tool I would like to use with my students is blank because. And then once they are aware of the question and the sentence stem, you have the class give a hand signal, thumbs up, thumb down, depending on whether they're ready to talk and move on with the lesson. And then they share with one another. And I had a timer for about 3 minutes, just a very short, low pressure, low stakes conversation. And when they share out with classmates or the staff members share out with one another, they use that sentence stem to share their ideas with a colleague. And then 2 to 3 people could share out with the whole group. And then, as a teacher or an instructor, while students are sharing with one another out loud to the class, this is when you can assess whether or not a student has achieved the learning objective. You can kind of walk around the room, rotate around to see who's having conversations about the content, and you can provide little stems along the way or probing questions to see if they are engaging with the learning objective. See, and of course, to finish off the PD, you want to make sure that there any questions or lingering ideas are addressed before that closes out. And then, of course, I have the sources here, 2 from our class texts, Reason, Freeman, and Freeman. And then a great resource online is McGrath and Shorey. Very up-to-date website, constantly adding things to help teachers better represent their multilingual learners. If you haven't heard of them or checked this out before, I highly recommend it. It might even be something good to show some of your future classes. Thanks for listening in. I hope you enjoy my PD, and have a good rest of your day.